Hey, everybody. Welcome. My name is April Trelana, and we're here again for another monthly meetup for Windy City REI. If it's your first time here, make sure you introduce yourselves. We're a great group of investors, and we love helping each other out. I have a couple of housekeeping items. First and foremost, we would love to thank Navigator Tap Room for letting us commandeer their place for a couple of hours every month. Let's thank them by keeping your glasses full and buying drinks. Next, if you do not know, the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit is happening next weekend, the 6th and the 7th. It's a great place to meet new investors. It's actually where Windy City REI, where this group was started back in 2020. We met a bunch of great investors who've become really good friends of ours. And it's a great place to meet and propel you to the next level of your investing journey. If you want to buy a ticket, you can use the promo code WINDY for a discount. We are also raffling off 2 tickets at the end of the meetup. So make sure you sign in with a QR code at the front so that you can be entered into the raffle. And this leads us to our very special guest who we are very excited to welcome back. If you do not know who he is, just ask a question on Bigger Pockets about the Chicago rental market, and he's going to answer you. He's also been featured on the Straight Up Chicago podcast, not 1, but 5 times. He's the managing broker at Forte Properties. He's an active investor with over 150 units now. He's also going to be speaking at the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit, our good friend and mentor who helped us buy our 2 multifamily properties, John Warren. Yay.
I'm super excited to be here. That was an awesome introduction too. Thank you. So this is a really interesting topic. I called one of my partners on the way here and was like, hey, they're having me in to talk about construction financing, which is something I've done 4 of. I never feel like I really figured this out. It's not like riding a bicycle. So anyway, I'm happy to talk about my experience with it. Estimating and financing construction costs, something that I think will help a lot of people propel themselves forward. Pro tips and pitfalls. So first, I wanted to kind of give a little introduction to me, some of the projects I've done. So this is just a quick list. And what I did on here is show you how many deals I did without it, construction financing, before I did 1 with it. So you'll see that deal 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 do not have a star by them. That means that I finance things the dumb way, which is out of your pocket, or by doing work myself. Several of those earlier deals, I was doing things like painting cabinets and changing countertops, unfortunately. But as I got into this more and got other partnerships and grew, I started doing more and more deals where construction financing really, really made sense due to the scope of work. Uh-oh. No presentation. Oh, it's always the tech guys. Well, I'll just wait so you can see all the cool projects that I've done. There it is. So you'll see that deals 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 were not construction loan deals. My first building ever was a 4-unit residential, just standard buy and hold. And after that, I got into commercial real estate investing pretty quickly in 2016. But I did not ever do any construction financing until 2020. So I did like whole 5 years of deals with no construction financing. So I'll show you a few of the deals that I did without it. This one we added a unit. We renovated, I think, 8 of the 20 units and then sold it to another smarter value add investor who made a ton of money off of us. That was pretty exciting. This was a 9 flat in Berwyn, where I literally turned 3 or 4 of the units myself with one guy helping me. That was pretty stupid. If you ever are in a partnership, don't do a bunch of work yourself. Hire people. Whoops. I went too fast. No. There we go. This is a deal that I did in 2018 into 2019, which is a 19-unit building. This definitely should have been a construction loan. We did over $500,000 in construction out of pocket. Yeah, that was dumb. Again, I'm somebody that learns by doing, so I just kind of do things and figure it out. If you want to have some real fun, I can show you what my projections were for the rehab. They were laughably wrong, but it turned out to be a great deal. One of the best deals I've done to this day. And the last deal I did without a construction loan, this lovely little 6 flat where I sunk over $150,000 into this thing. Yikes. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Pipes leaking under the slab, boiler pipes leaking under the slab, a sewer line that failed into the slab. It was great. What a fun building. No construction financing, just the good old fashioned way. You're probably asking why I'm saying all this, and that is, I learned kind of slowly sometimes, but I'm really glad I had this experience when it finally came time to do construction financing, because I had learned a lot over the 5 years that I'd started investing. And here's the first deal that I ever did a construction loan on, a 22 unit value add in Cicero that we did during the pandemic. We inherited only 8 vacancies out of 22, and we retained all of the tenants except for one by moving them internally while we gutted this building in 1 year. It was a wild, wild ride, and it turned out pretty well overall. All right, cool. So I wanted to talk a little about the idea of why do you finance construction or not? To finance or not to finance? That is the question. One of the first things I would tell a younger or newer investor is that if the project is not large enough, you don't want to try to do financing. If you're just going in and doing a couple unit turns, maybe you're putting in 15, 20 grand into a building, I feel like it's very inefficient. And I think that this would hold true whether you're doing a big commercial construction deal or a 203K loan. If you're thinking, I'm going to get a 203K loan and take down a 2 flat, put in all new kitchens, all new bathrooms, do all this, it's probably not going to make sense in my experience. Normally it has to be a large enough amount of construction for a general contractor to get excited about doing your project, so that you can attract the right general contractor so that you can have a good experience. Another thing to think about, is there significant vacancy at your project? So vacancy is actually a really good thing for construction. As soon as you talk to a plumber, the first thing they're going to say is, hey, do you have all of the units in a tier available where I can come in and do all the plumbing at once? You go, well, no, I have a tenant in the middle. And they're like, well, cool, call me back when they're out and we'll do it. And you're like, what workaround is there? There's not. And then you're going to talk to your electrician and say, well, how are we going to run new conduit? And they're like, well, you're going to take the tenants out, right? Well, no, of course not. We're going to keep them so we get revenue. This is the whole problem. So it's actually a good thing if you have a lot of vacancy in a multifamily building. And again, I think this applies whether it's 2 or 3 units or whether it's 30. If you have significant vacancy, that's a great opportunity to use a construction loan. Of course, do you have access to capital to help you complete the project? I'm going to share some actual numbers from a recent deal that I did. And you'll see that the construction loan was not a cure-all for lack of funding. We had to have funding. We actually went over budget and had to write a very painful check to pay the general contractor for the work they did. And that's the way the cookie crumbles. So I think you have to make sure that you do have access to additional capital. Are you okay paying more for the construction in order to finance it? This is something that dawned on me later on in the project. So a lot of you own buildings in here, right? How many of you own buildings in the room right now? A lot of people. If you own a building, you got a guy. He's got a truck. He's your guy. He's a little cheaper than most of the people. You got this relationship with him. That's not the guy who's going to do the work on your project that is being funded by a construction loan, because the person you're going to hire has to be able to front the funding for their guys for a period of time so that you can get paid through a construction draw and pay them back. So you always will pay more if you're financing construction in general than if you're paying out of pocket. And then I guess one of the other questions I would ask somebody, are you trying to burr the property? Are you trying to flip the property? Is it more of a buy and hold? All of these things would play into whether or not you should get construction financing for your project. Let's talk through some of the positives, the benefits of construction financing. The most recent project that I did, which we're still in the middle of doing, we were able to put down 15% on the acquisition and the construction. That was pretty cool versus me buying like a 4 unit where I have to put down 25%. So I could really keep a lot more cash in me and my partner's pocket than if we did a traditional loan. On my very first construction deal with a local bank, they did something cool that I'd never even heard of called an interest reserve, where they actually had an interest-only period, and then they had part of the loan to pay the interest-only period, so we didn't have to for the whole year. I was like, what? I don't have to pay you guys at all? That made it made it so it was a lot easier to renovate because we weren't stressed like, oh no, we've got this big payment coming. Instead, we had a whole year to really focus on getting operations solid so the building could pay for itself. That was something my banker knew that I didn't even know existed. So all goes back to just asking lots of good questions and working with good people. Interest only is probably something else that you should be aware of. In residential, I've not seen it as much, but in commercial, it's pretty common in a construction loan to get interest only or on a construction loan, a bridge loan. Interest only can really help you through that first year where your project's not stable. You don't have a lot of renters. You don't have a lot of income coming in, but you know it's a worthwhile project to have once it's stabilized. One of the other pros, in my opinion, of financing construction costs is that you can wipe away tons of deferred maintenance. Obviously, we want to do value add investments where we drive rents, right? That's the goal. Is you always want to put your money into like a shiny new kitchen where you can get more rents. But sometimes it is nice to have a brand spanking new roof that you're never going to have to touch again. That's pretty awesome for the next 20 to 30 years. And I like using a construction loan for that because you tend to get pretty good pricing, whether you pay out of pocket or whether you use a construction loan on something like a tear-off roof. And then kind of like I mentioned earlier, you take advantage of the float where you get a chance to get the project repositioned so it can pay for itself. That's a huge advantage of a construction loan. Cons of financing construction. And there's many cons that I think you all should think about if you're considering doing construction loans. Working capital. Sometimes you hire a subcontractor and they can't wait for your bank to do a loan draw because, you know, they have to pay their mortgage and their car note. Otherwise, they won't be able to come back to your project. You have to have money for that. And so even though you may be getting more money from your bank, you still have to pay them initially to kind of keep things going. Probably the biggest con that I still can't stand about construction loans is that many of them use, say, title companies to do their draws. There's nothing more annoying than getting 700 lien waivers and getting a million pictures and having an inspector from the title company come out and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting to get the money from your loan that you were so excited about. So that's part of the process that's really frustrating that I think a lot of investors don't understand. Just because you finish the work doesn't mean you get the money right away. At least not with most lenders. The other thing that I think is a con is there's constraints of your original budget when scope creep happens. And we'll talk about that here in a minute, but you set a budget when you buy a property, then you get in, you start tearing it apart and you go, man, it'd be really cool if we did fill in the blank, whatever that next cool thing is. Maybe you weren't going to gut the bathroom and now you're like, oh, that tile looks kind of scuzzy now that we painted everything else. Scope creep happens. And the original budget can be a huge constraint for you when you're doing these projects. They can be very inflexible. And there at the bottom, I put the biggest constraint of all, which is there's a time limit. So all of these things like interest reserves and interest-only periods normally come with a period of time that feels pretty short. 12 months is a really short period of time to do construction, especially on a larger project. Even 18 months is not very long. So that's something else just to keep in the back of your mind if you're thinking of doing more of these types of projects. So I'm going to walk you through the next part of the presentation with an actual deal that I did. And I'm going to start with some initial planning that I did and kind of talk about how that works. And also try to teach you some of the lessons that I wish that I had known when I started. So this is one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. Start with the end in mind. So imagine what you want this property to be when you're done with it, how you want it to perform. You have to kind of visualize all the different elements of construction and make sure that they are all in your budget. Don't forget the hallways. Don't forget that annoying, huge 3-story wooden porch in the back of your building that you really, really don't want to do, but you know you probably will have to do. Yeah, that's me. Don't forget the concrete. Don't forget the exterior gates or doors. You know, any of those types of things that are easy to forget about. Start with those in mind. Make sure your budget is realistic and can encompass all the things that you need to do. So don't go cheap. Be cost effective. There is a very small, fine line for all of us landlords and landladies in here between being cheap and cost effective. And I can tell you some ways that I've been cheap and cost effective here in a little bit, but be cost effective. Plan for the worst and hope for the best. Part of what has allowed me to keep buying buildings is I am an eternal optimist. I always think this is going to turn out great. And then I tear the thing apart and I still know it's going to turn out great, even though we go over budget and things are going wrong. And normally it does, but sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, it's really frustrating. It's like a punch in the gut. So plan for the worst as much as you can in these buildings because things will go wrong. Probably the worst part of the entire process when you're doing a more full construction loan is that you're likely to be pulling a lot of permits. This is something I think that all investors run into. There's this fine gray area of permitting. And obviously, if somebody from the city's here, we always pull permits for everything. But that's the thing. When you do a project with a full construction loan, you're going to be doing architectural drawings and engineer reviews and all kinds of stuff that you have no idea what you're doing. Even if you've done it a few times, you just don't know what you're doing. So that is delay city, and it adds a lot of cost as well. All right, cool. I promised you I'd tell you some cool ways that I was cost effective. In the project that I'm about to tell you about, which is a 13-unit project that we did a full gut renovation on last year, one of the things that we figured out is that we could paint everything white in the entire building, spray it white, and it would look really, really sharp. And it does look really sharp, but it would save us a small fortune. You can imagine over 13 units in all the hallways, not having to cut in anywhere, not having to paint any trim or any doors, but just literally just spraying everything. That was a huge, huge, huge win for us. And we saved quite a bit of money on that project. Some other ways that we've saved money on previous projects. We used a flooring vendor on one project that was all concrete in the building. And we used a glue down vinyl plank floor that was only $1.06 a square foot for the material. And it was $2.06 a square foot installed, which is like dirt cheap. Do that times 22 and you can see where there's some pretty significant savings versus like Home Depot where it's $2.50 a square foot. And then you pay your handyman $2 a square foot. You do a little bit of math, you're like, wow, that's some real money. One of my favorites is bulk ordering of material. I recently found a place where you can buy the same flooring as Home Depot. You can have it shipped and it's about half the price. No, I'm not putting it in the presentation. You have to ask me afterwards, but that's been a huge value for me. On this 30-unit project, we have 2 pallets of flooring in the basement, and our flooring guy just grabs what he needs and bangs out a unit and he's out. Careful selection of lighting, plumbing, trim, and other bulk options. So if you're doing a larger project, let's say you're doing a 3-flat or a 4-flat, you're going to be picking out 3 or 4 kitchens, 3 or 4 bathrooms, 3 or 4 units worth of lighting fixtures. The difference between the $30 option and the $70 option on the lighting fixture, it does add up if you're doing enough fixtures, especially as your project increases, these things add up even more and more. Finding those effective lighting fixture choices that look modern and fresh, but also don't cost $150, that can be a really good use of your time and a way to keep your money in your pocket. I kind of hit on the last point I had earlier, the efficient subcontractors, but there are different subcontractors that can save a fortune on projects like this. Normally what I found with my subcontractors is if they're good communicators, that can make all the difference. I have a really great electrician and great plumber who they do this crazy thing. They text me when they have questions or problems. Wow, life-changing. So if you can find the right subcontractors, that can make all the difference between somebody that's good at their trade, but is not a good communicator. Sometimes you could pay a little more for that efficient subcontractor and you get a better progress through the project. All right, so some pictures, because pictures are worth 1,000 words. So this little dog here was the 13-unit project I promised you I'd tell you about. Notice the blankets hanging out of the window. Yeah, it was special, special place. All 3 doors were hanging open. You could just walk wherever you wanted. It was pretty great. Give you one more view of this lovely building. So I'll do a quick walkthrough of one of the units. This was right after an eviction of a heroin addict. Very sad. Relatively nice person, but really tragic life. Pretty nice unit, right? Sure, all of you would be excited to rent that one out. Yeah. Just thinking of Gabby while I was going through this. Here's right after we cleared out the unit. Our junk guys came. It was all gone. We started staging construction. You can see that already we'd cut holes for conduit and started prepping for the unit turn. And we gutted it. That's always the fun part. You get rid of most of the roaches that way. This is one of my favorite pictures of the project. I took one of these in every unit. These units were so rough that we took the entire plumbing wall down between the kitchen and bathroom. You could just see right through the unit. This is right after they framed the unit out. And here's the project today. Plus 160 new windows, a full tuck pointing job, new porches, new roof, new plumbing, new electrical, new HVAC, all that good stuff. Oh, and new doors that closed. That was pretty exciting too. And here is one of the units, just a quick walkthrough. So again, this came from a construction loan, and this is the one that we decided to spray everything white. I think it turned out really, really well. Of course, I'm biased. but we picked out light fixtures that contrasted, but they're also dirt cheap. They sell those at Menards, if you're curious. Flooring is Home Depot. Whoop, too fast, sorry. Again, all white, so it looks really clean and fresh, but really, really cheap to do because we could spray the entire unit at once. So these were really fast to turn in comparison to if we did a lot of custom finishes. We bulk ordered the cabinets. All the cabinets were the same. They were all the espresso, and they used the same countertops in all 13 units. Sir. I think we just did it all flat, if I recall right. I honestly don't remember what we chose. We might have done a sheen. Good question. Yeah. I will add to that though, paint. I mean, I'm 8 years into this and I'm not convinced that it matters. I think that all paint has to be repainted most of the time. So I don't know, but it's a good point. Bathrooms, it'd probably be a good idea to have a more sheen in the bathroom. We'll get on the next unit turn. All right, cool. So kind of in follow-up to that, preparing for budget overruns. So your budgets are going to go over a lot of the time, no matter how good you are at this or how much you do this type of thing. It's really hard to be completely accurate on your budget, and that's okay. Material costs can rise dramatically over 1 year, especially during a pandemic. I don't know if any of you were tracking lumber, but lumber was just insanity for the last couple of years. Now it's, I guess, kind of back down to normal. Sometimes poor planning can lead to misunderstandings with contractors. Fortunately, on this project, I was a little further along and didn't have too much of that, but some of my earlier projects I did. Extra items pop up that you want to do. Scope creep. Remember I said scope creep earlier. So for me in this project, scope creep was a laundry room and also building out the storage units and making them look nice. When we started, the storage units looked pretty okay in the basement. I thought, we could patch those up. By the time we got done, I realized how rancid that basement was, and we ended up pretty much just gutting the whole thing and rebuilding the whole basement area. So fun scope creep. And of course, major vacancies. So this project, I anticipated having some vacancy. We ended up having substantial vacancy because we had 3 units that had to be fully evicted by the sheriff, like where you wait till the very last day, the sheriff shows up on month 7 or 8, threatens to break down the door, that whole thing. We had 3 of those in one day. It was pretty fun. So that took a lot of capital because we had no rent coming in that whole time. I guess one thing I threw in there, property management is intertwined with construction projects and multifamily. Something to keep in the back of your mind. A great general contractor cannot fix your lack or your property manager's lack of management. There's got to be a communication between management and construction so you can keep things moving. The numbers, here we go. 13 units. You guys ready? Dun, dun, dun. Here was my initial budget. $418,905. And obviously this contract had a lot more in it than that, but I figured I'd give you just like the raw numbers of what we thought we'd spend. Anybody have their calculator can do some quick and dirty math, 13 units. That's a pretty, yeah, it was a pretty good price per door, right? For what it was. Doing new windows, gutting the units. At this point in the project, I thought we could save the porches. Horrible, but I thought we could save the porches, which would have saved us a lot of money. And we also decided to save the steam boiler to save money as well. And that was before we got the first 6 bills for like $1,500 each one. And I was like, nope, we're not saving that thing. So here is the budget, how it looked at the very, very end. And the number to look for is right here. It's pretty small, sorry. 507,480. So you can see that we went over budget. Worst of all, we weren't even done. This was just the construction loan part. I wanted to do the laundry room still. Oh, man. So we're already over budget. What did I start at? 418, 419 for quick and dirty math, 419. We came in at 507. So yeah, guess what? What happens with that overage? The lender is not going to give you that money. The contractor deserves the money. They finished the work. So guess who gets to write the check? That's why you have partners. No, I'm joking. That was a painful check. All right. And this was the overage, where we built out the laundry rooms. So I ended up paying $7,500 for framing out a laundry room, running plumbing, electrical, all kinds of good stuff like that, building out 13 storage rooms. completely drywalling a basement and doing some roofing work that the general contractor missed. Oh yeah, it turns out if you put in furnaces that you didn't plan for, they poke holes in your roof all over the place. Oh yeah, you got to call a roofer at the end. Right. Yeah. So there you go. There's the overage. So construction loans. Hopefully I didn't depress all of you with that because we went over $100,000 over budget. I still felt great about this project when we got done. We completely turned this building around and every single major system has been touched and should run for 10 years with minimal maintenance. That has some real value to a buy and hold investor. We did not get all of our money out. We refinanced on Friday, but we left only about $250,000 in the deal. I'm okay with that. We put good debt on it. Overall cost benefit. So why would you do a construction loan? Well, it requires way less out-of-pocket capital. You have, in some cases, interest only or interest reserves, like we talked about earlier, and ramp-up periods and things like that. Here is, and these are not completely accurate, I'll be honest with you, because there's missing a lot of things, and I did this early in the morning. But this just shows with a construction loan what our approximate out-of-pocket ended up being versus without a construction loan. Without a construction loan, trying to do all that work, you got to pay for that. So you can't find lenders to let you put down 5% on the property. You still have to put down around 20% probably, and then you have to come up with the money. So still ended up being very, very worthwhile for us to have financed the construction on this deal. Cool. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Any questions for me now that I've thrown tons and tons and tons at you? Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
I have two questions. So when you talk about like ordering, what do you do with appliances? Like other full packages you buy or?
Most of the time, it depends on the project. We've done a lot of used appliances. I know it sounds terrible, but let me tell you, after the first year, it's used anyway. Your second tenant won't care. So we've done a lot of used ones. Otherwise, we use ABT, which I know isn't nothing spectacular, but they, if you do a lot of apartments, a couple of things you should know about ABT that I just discovered. It's really easy to start a commercial account where you have 30 days like net billing where you can pay them within 30 days. And you get really good pricing if you get into their, if you get past their residential department, you talk to like their contractor department, you get really good pricing. So if we're doing new, we do them most of the time. Who else had another question? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. No. Yeah, it's a used appliance vendor. I work with a couple different ones. If you're in the city, L&L is pretty good. I've got my boy Adam there. If you're in the suburbs, I work with a guy, Pepe, who's also very good. When I was in South Bend, we did the same thing. If you're in South Bend, there's an awesome used appliance store. I feel like in general, investors should be willing to use used appliances. Unless you're in like an A-class neighborhood, let me tell you, after a bad tenant lives with your brand new stainless steel appliance, it's going to look just the same as the clean one that your used guy rolled in. So I don't know. I've gotten a lot of good wear out of them. The counter argument to that is you'll have more repairs. So there is obviously a fine line, but the 19-unit building that I did with no construction loan, we used all used appliances, and we've only had like, I don't know, half dozen calls in the last 4 years. So not bad. Yeah. Sure.
How did you overcome that? Was that the concrete, or did you have an alternative solution?
I've had that problem now twice, and the first building, it happened in phases, which was really frustrating. So the first one of the underground supply lines failed, and we replumbed the entire basement and then closed the drywall. And then within a month, we realized that the boiler was losing pressure, which is a sign for leaking. So then we reopened the drywall and ran all new boiler baseboard copper fin around. Yeah, it was fun. A lot of fun. The second time it happened, so the current project we're working on has a building like that, and we've done the concrete twice. My boiler guy last year or whatever is, last season fixed it, and then within 6 months it failed again, but in a different spot. Talk about frustrating. So yeah, I mean, if you have a building with utilities in the slab, you should be aware of that, and it's not fun to fix, and it's not cheap. I would abandon it if possible.
Did you explore running new plumbing lines altogether from the service up to the attic and then the?
In the first building, so we ran them through the, it was very cost effective for us because of the way that it was plumbed to run them in the ceiling. So we just did in the first, is the garden level ceiling is where we ran it. There was no attic there either, it's all flat. But The second building, it's all been boilers so far, not potable. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a fun problem you'll have if you have a concrete building, especially Flexicor. Some of you invest in other states. Is Flexicor a thing in other states? Flexicor, is that mostly a Chicago thing? I mean, yeah, we get these Flexicor buildings. They're great because they're all concrete, except that they ran all your utilities through the concrete and it's all buried in there. And the conduit they use is rotting out. So yeah, that's your electrical and your plumbing and your boiler. Pretty fun. Did you say good financing? We had hard money financing, so it wasn't good. It's good now. It was 8.5%, which looks really good now, but it was bad then. So what does good look like today? I think my local bank will do something in like the 9s on construction or 8s. And I think if you have an A-class area, you can get a lot better than that. There's another lender I've heard of that's doing like low to mid 6s, but in better areas. So I think it's all about like how much you're bringing down and a lot of different factors.
Yeah. Most of these, I'm assuming, were recourse debt,
Yes, all of these are recourse.
and when you refi out to try to pull money out, is it still recourse debt?
I've been doing Freddie Mac. It's been my panacea for all ills so far. Freddie Mac small balance loans. So they're non-recourse and they're awesome. The debt that we just put on Friday was 5.4%, 10 years fixed, 4 years of interest only. So we were really, really happy with that interest only period too. We got an extra year. So. Freddie Mac. Yeah, no, agency, yeah.
So what are the terms for the construction loan? Assuming if I walk in and say, I want to buy 20 units, they're not going to just give me experience.
I feel like I bumbled into having experience, which is why I was able to start doing them. I mean, honestly, like when I first did one, I was with a lender who goes to one of the north side meetups here. It's like more of a hard money lender type lender. And they walked one of my projects, the 19 unit, and they saw that I was operating in the area and I had the liquidity and the experience, and they went with me. And then every deal just has been easier and easier for them because I know more what I'm doing. So the first deal, though, I used them. I didn't even use the construction loan. I just used the acquisition. And then I paid out of pocket for everything. So I told you, I learn really slowly. I'm kind of dumb sometimes, but so the reason we use the private or hard money company is they can close pretty much in 2 days. So they're awesome for like when you get a really good deal and you can say, hey, you want 700,000, we want to pay you 650, but we can close on Friday. That has meaning to a lot of people. Whereas the local bank, when I closed with them on the construction loan, it took like forever. It was terrible. It was during the pandemic. Everybody got COVID at the bank. It was just like a perfect storm. It took us like 4 months. We almost lost the deal, but yeah, it was a bad time. Obviously, my lender got COVID, then their processor got COVID, and it was just like on and on and on. So I wouldn't use the local bank if it was time sensitive. I saw a question over here. Yeah. Which one? The construction? Oh, yes. Yeah, defeasance.
10-year defeasance, or was it?
No, it's like the 9.5 or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Which we looked at, right? You have different options, and we're gonna hold it for 10 years, so there's no reason not to. Right. To still sell if we have to, assuming that the interest rates go back down, and then we look like dummies. Today it is, yeah. It's funny because I locked a Freddie Mac loan a year ago at 3.6. So it's funny, 5.4 is good though. And I think historically it's fine. So just you got to roll the dice. I don't know who's next. Go ahead.
Freddie Mac loans.
Yeah.
Are they only for multiple units or for single family residential?
This is specifically commercial multifamily. Yeah, in fact, this particular deal, we squeaked by. The value of the loan has to be $1 million or it's just a complete non-starter. And I knew that going in, it was going to be really, really close. So we're at $1,035,000 on the loan balance. So yeah, we're like, all right, all the coin laundry, everybody's paying. The breeze is going behind us. Yeah, it was rough. Yeah.
In terms of like budget overruns, mentioned the other time, it's kind of inevitable, but how can you reduce the chance of budget overrun?
Being smarter than me. I think one of the hard parts for me, so my strength as an investor is that I'm ready, fire, aim. I like a deal. My gut says yes. I take it down. I buy it. I get into it and figure it out. To make a perfect construction loan deal, you have to really be more analytical. But at the same time, going over budget sometimes is not the end of the world if you're doing deferred CapEx. I don't know. It's tough. I've gone over budget on all my deals. And yet somehow I keep investing and being happy with it. So
what is a minimum construction overrun that you should build into your deals? And what you would consider being really conservative to cover yourself for the construction as a percentage?
I feel like for me today, I think if we're plus or minus 15 to 20%, we're probably doing it right. I still feel good about the work we did on that deal. When you break it down on a per unit cost and realize all the stuff we did, it's really hard to get mad when you're like, oh man, we're all in for like 35,000 a door, but we did everything. It's not like, they just put paint on it. The paint was the least of our worries. So, but yeah, we have always gone over budget. It's a sad reality, and it's still not fun when you get to the end of it and you have to stroke that check because you've got all these cool interest only things and you're feeling good and your deal's finally making money. And it's like, in order to refinance, you have to pay them off, and you gotta do it. But like I said, I'd still do it again though. Sir. So every time I try to keep a steam boiler, it bites me. That particular project was a perfect example of where it's so hard not to have that scope creep. But we ended up doing HVAC there, and it's the best decision I made. We did separate HVAC and separate hot water tanks. So the only utilities we pay are water. And that's really makes it easy to underwrite the net operating income going forward because the tenants pay all utilities except for water. And if we all collude, maybe someday we can bill it back to them. I don't know. Who knows? But I didn't want to do that water service. I can tell you that much.
I guess at what point are you engaging like Fannie or Freddie Mac during the whole construction loan process? Is that like right at the beginning?
No, it's like it's ridiculous. How many people in here have done Freddie and Fannie? I know a couple people have, right? 2 or 3 people. Yeah. I feel like it's such an amazing, it's like a joke almost. It takes like 2 weeks. They need a T1, 1 month of trailing operating data that fits the pro forma. So you get your project stabilized, you give them a call, you're like, hey, next month, let's go. The only thing now is the interest rates have been so volatile this year that it's not quite as simple to know when to pull the trigger, because it's like, you don't want to be that guy that pulls the trigger and the next month it's like 50 basis points lower and you're like, oh, rats. But they're really, really easy to do deals with on a refinance, especially when you can show that you've done the work. You're like, we gutted this building. It's not a very hard story to sell. They get that. That's the kind of product they like, because they want really clean operating buildings, so that way that they sell it, they never hear about it again. So yeah, don't go cheap, go cost effective. I always tell clients and friends that are getting into construction, try to find ways, you're not screwing your contractor, try to find ways to get cheaper materials or things like that. Like you buy cheap flooring, your contractor doesn't care. But if you're trying to get your contractor to do work for 50% off, that's a different thing, right? So yeah, that's interesting to hear your experience as a contractor with those. But yeah.
Did you have investors in that deal?
These have all been either JV partnerships or in one, I think the one deal I did was just me.
Did you guys underwrite for a 10% or 15 or 20% house overrun?
You're making me look good. I'm a little bit more gut than that, but yes, I mean, I always anticipate things can go over. And I guess the answer to that is we're always capitalized well enough to jump in and fix the problem, even if it doesn't feel good. Yeah. And some of those checks that I've written that didn't feel good have ended up being the deals I'm the most proud of a year later, once the pain goes away and the cash flow starts up. So I think, yeah. You never run out of money. That's the secret to the game. You always win as long as you don't run out. It sounds obvious, but yeah. Terrible. In fact, the deal that I just talked about, we would have probably been done 4 to 5 months earlier, but they use a program called Safe Built. I don't know if any contractors in here have run into Safe Built. It's a nightmare. So the porch, way to put a Chicago style porch on, pretty standard. Most contractors can build these things in their sleep at this point. And they sent it to some place in Ohio There was first, there's a structural engineer. He reviews it. He wants to know like how many courses of brick are on the building and all this nonsense. Then we pass that. Then it goes to the architect, and the architect wants to know like wind load calculations and this and that. They kick it back to us. Then they want the structural engineer that's on our architect's payroll to, revise stuff. Long story short, it took about 6 months just to get the permit. We actually had built the entire porch and we left the footings. They were just propped up. And the inspector shows up. We're like, oh yeah, we just finished yesterday. Here, look, look at the pre-pour. It had been done for like 3 months. So they were awful. Yeah, if we waited for them, we'd still be doing construction. And the same thing, we had to do the garden unit. It was a full plans and permits. Similar thing. They made us pull all new electrical permits, even though our existing permit covered rewiring that. They want a separate one. It was just like, whatever, just do what they tell you to do.
All right, guys, let's give a big.
Yeah, yeah.